Hi, I'm Will Sharon, and I want to talk to you today about this thing called emotional intelligence. It's come back into vogue a lot, particularly in the business world, and really historically, we first saw the term back in the 60s, but it became really popularized in 1995 with Daniel Goleman's book called Emotional Intelligence. And I read it a long time ago, obviously, but what I recall was that there were studies in there about people who went to Harvard with great GPAs and intelligence scores off the charts. And it turned out they had pretty unsuccessful lives, not just in business, but personally as well. And so, this whole idea that there was another kind of intelligence called emotional intelligence that one needed, particularly as a leader, and actually in general in life, it's very useful to have this thing called emotional intelligence. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my experience so that you can see that I tend to think of this in terms of enlightened self interest or emotional awareness. But we're stuck with the term emotional intelligence, so we'll stay with that. Some of you may know that for the first 13 years of my adult life, I worked in clinical environments, first in what we then call state psychiatric hospitals, in children's units, and then as a clinical social worker at the Veterans Administration. So that was sort of the formative experience that I had as a young man coming out of college. And then I had about a 30-year career in corporate America and in things like real estate and technology and risk management. And I was very fortunate. I achieved those titles of Chief Operating Officer and Chief Information Officer and Chief Risk Officer. Well, so one has to ask, well, how the heck did that happen? I mean, this guy is a clinical social worker. How does that make any sense in terms of those particular fields? And what I want to talk to you about today is how I tend to think about emotional intelligence, which is really based on what we call the three C's. That's the letter C. And we'll go through them. And hopefully, I'll be able to help you see how the dream work that we do as individuals also helps us as leaders and also in terms of understanding the groups that we are leading. So, the best thing to do is sort of step right into what are the three C's. Well, the first one is curiosity. And that sounds fairly simple. You know, you can be a curious person and still not seem to be emotionally intelligent. And usually this is the way it manifests. I have a lot of people, managers come to me and they say, well, I can understand why people won't do what I explained to them they need to do, or won't do it with the same enthusiasm that I did it when I had their jobs. And so my first question always is, well, who are they? And it's very interesting that there's a long pause usually in terms of understanding who the people are in the team that you're responsible for. And I remember very specifically one executive that I asked that question of, who seemed a bit flummoxed by it and realized that he actually didn't know. And the next time we got together, he brought a dream. And this is the dream he brought. There are two men who have a cabaret act, and I go to see them. They sing and they dance and they do magic tricks and jokes. I think it's a really good act, and I go to see them after the show. I ask them how long they've been performing, and they tell me that it's been about a year. I'm surprised at how good they've gotten. One of the men tells me that each time they do the act, they ask someone to come and only watch or listen to part of it. In the show that I just saw, they'd ask someone to listen to the singing to tell them if they were on pitch or not. They've been doing that each time with a different focus for the whole year. I realize that they know more about what they're doing than what I saw when I was in the audience. For a moment, it feels like I can see the depth of their understanding of each part of what they do. This dream was really the catalyst for this man to begin to be very curious about the people who were on his team and how they thought about what they did and how they thought it could be integrated into the team as a whole. And he began to understand that there were aspects of some of these folks who really had a lot to offer, but really couldn't figure out the avenue or the way in which they could express themselves. And so this was the beginning of a process for this executive to really build a culture. So that's the first C in this business of emotional intelligence, curiosity. The second C is courage. Now, that word gets tossed around a lot. And there are some things where people are told that they're being courageous when, quite frankly, I don't think they are. They're just, doing something that is really the next step in their process, whether it's losing 30 pounds or deciding that they're going to change their careers and so forth. These are things that we feel propelled or compelled to do. My definition of courage is a healthy relationship with the unknown. Okay? That's really what I think courage is about. And what that means is that you realize in yourself that you don't really know everything there is to know about what's going on. And that's particularly valuable if you're a senior manager, because I always found there's a title of a book called The Smartest Guy in the Room, which always just amazed me, that somebody thinks that's the right position for a manager to have, to be smarter than everybody else. Well, if that's true, you've got a big problem in your organization. You don't want to be smarter than everybody else. It is true you have a higher level of responsibility. It is true that you're responsible for the decisions. But if you don't have a lot of smart people working for you, you're toast, because you can do very limited things for them. You can get them promotions and give them opportunities and raises, but they determine whether you're successful or not. And that's an imbalanced equation. So courage means that you enter into situations where you personally understand that you don't know and that you have to be willing to find out. Now, there's a little bit different slant on this in terms of the dream I'm going to tell you about. It was a woman who had just been promoted to a fairly senior position. And she got that promotion because she had a whole series of experiences where she had actually pulled teams together that had not been functioning very well and got them to really do some fantastic work. And very often is the case. That's when a middle manager gets promoted to be a senior manager. And all of a sudden she discovered that she had to communicate planning in writing. That's not what she'd done. She'd been a very intuitive manager. So this was a big problem. And we discussed it. Turned out it wasn't the fact that she couldn't write. She actually did have some decent writing skills. But it was a question of whether she thought she was going to be heard or not. So this is her dream. There's a man telling me that I need to write a book. I have no idea how to do that, and I don't even know what to write about. He doesn't seem to pay any attention to my protests. He tells me to come with him, and we go into an office. Immediately, I feel at home there. It's furnished in a way that is appealing to me and has many small things in it that I immediately love. I feel very calm. He asks me to sit down at a desk and opens up the laptop computer that is there, and a screen comes up that has a blank page. He motions for me to start to write. I still have no idea what to write about, but I still feel very calm, and I start typing. So there's a couple of things about this dream. First of all, there's the obvious subject of the writing. But the issue here really is that what dreams will do in terms of emotional intelligence is they will take a real fear in your current life and completely dissipate it and show you a way in which it really is irrelevant, that you have this fear that you're not going to be heard. Your dreamer is basically saying, this is nonsense. You have this. This is yours. You earned it. So we have curiosity and we have courage. And again, I want to repeat, courage is a healthy relationship with the unknown. And the last part of this, the last C, is collaboration. Now, it's no secret that women are much better acculturated to collaboration than men are in this culture. And so this dream that I'm going to tell you about is of a man, again, a guy who had a fairly senior position. And he was one of those people who had good relationships with each one of the folks that were on his team. But the problem was that's how he would relate to them, one-on-one, on-one. And he was responsible for some fairly complex projects. So this got to be very burdensome for everybody, including him. I mean, at some point, you kind of fall over if you're trying to understand what everybody's doing and then integrate it in your own mind to make sure that things get done. We call that in some circles micromanagement or control freaks. But it comes from a place of a lack of a particular skill, this one that we call collaboration. So as we began to understand the problem, he had this dream. I'm in a class and there's a teacher who I revere. After the class, I'm walking through a market and I'm handing out little silver coins to each person. My teacher appears and tells me to take a handful of coins and throw them in the air. I'm worried that many of them will fall to the ground and be lost, but he's insistent. I take a handful of the coins and I throw them in the air and see that each one is caught. I'm surprised and I'm very satisfied. And then I see that everyone who has caught a coin is also throwing coins in the air. And they're all different colors, and I catch one of each. Now that's a heck of a dream. And it was startling to this guy because people had been telling him, you know, get the group together, let the group sort this out. You can't do it all on your own. And he couldn't see it. And what's phenomenal about dreams is they're an internal conversation with yourself. So all these people who have been telling him to do this didn't resonate with him. But when he told himself to do it, there was no way out. So the 3 C's are basically about what I would call emotional awareness. And the really wonderful thing about this is that it's continual. It's like, I don't play golf, but I'm guessing it's like golf. You never really master the game. You get better at it. You kind of understand which club to use and all that stuff. But it's continual. And your dreams, if you are in the proper frame of mind, in other words, if you're really asking for this kind of help, your dreams will educate you. And they're an aspect of you that is no less valuable, and I would argue some cases more valuable than your cognitive mind. There's something that we should all pay attention to. And what's interesting to me is that, you know, folks come to me, they take my course, or they say to me, well, you know, that's great, but I'm an executive coach. I can't use dreams. And it's like, why not? Well, what would people think? I said, just ask, you know, I just ask. Over half the executives that I ask say, oh yeah, sure. Wow, let's do that. Why? Because a really good executive knows that the job is really about creativity. The job is really a constant learning process. You want to get better and better and better and better. And how do you do that? You do that by, yes, some external skills, but you also do it through this internal learning and this internal dialogue that you have with yourself. And your dreams are a very powerful character in that conversation. So look, if this resonates with you, if this feels like I'm kind of curious about this, you know, go on my website, willsharon.com, set up a session. I don't charge for these first sessions, and if that's all it is, that's fine. But I think it's important that we begin to understand that our dreams are not just some sort of kind of nice to have spiritual experience. No, they are a very practical part of our experience as human beings. And they can inform us in ways that other people can't because they come from us. They are really our message about the essence of who we are. And when you drive that into your responsibility as a manager, it's extraordinarily powerful. So I hope this was helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.